Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Hey, Genevieve, can you see my screen?
I can see your screen.
Great, okay. So can hundreds of others. Where's everybody coming in from? All right, guys, we'll get started here. Where'd my chat go? There it is. There it is. Okay, okay. We got Austin, San Francisco. We've got the Bay Area. Hey, Dave. I know Dave. Or the Keys. Okay, so we've gone coast to coast. Welcome, everybody. Again, we'll get started here in a few minutes. I'm just going to let everybody jump on board. New Jersey. Hello, New Jersey. Steamboat Springs. What a beautiful place. All right, we'll give it another 45 seconds and then we'll get started. Lauren, are you going to have any interactive poll questions or anything? People need to be really familiar with the chat here if you are. Yesterday we had some voting on the funniest meme. Oh, you know what? Speaking of funny memes, let's see. What is my best background? I need a green screen, so this one doesn't really. What do you think, Genevieve?
That was my least favorite option that I sent you.
Is it? Okay, hang on. Hang on. We can. There we go. I mean, my shirt is maybe I need to go shirtless. Just kidding. Just I'll spare everybody. All right, we'll get started. Hey, everybody, welcome. Genevieve, this is webinar number 9. Am I way off?
Yes, I think this is our 9th webinar that we've hosted over the last month.
So we'll get into kind of the formal introduction, but before we do that, please, everybody here, if you're new to our webinars, welcome. We have kind of a landing place, a place for collaboration. It's our Facebook group. It's actually your Facebook group. We call it KT Childcare Connect. It's a place where we talk about what's going on through this tumultuous time in our industry. There's a lot of great content here. Many of the thought leaders that we have on the webinars are active here. I think one of the best threads that we've had is the one on the PPP loans and seeing which banks were on top of things, which banks were lagging, and also hearing some of the tragic stories from those of you who applied and didn't hear back from your banks, and some of the banks were not as on top of things. But there's also a place here to discuss best practices, recovery, when you're coming back, and give us suggestions on the content we can bring you. So please join that. We'd love to have you in the group. And for those of you that don't know, Kangaroo Time is a software company. We build software that helps you communicate with your staff, your team, your families, and we also help with a billing platform, a parent connectivity platform. So it's a replacement for ProCare, a replacement for Tadpoles, but we've also got scheduling tools. So as you come back, and in this time, we're giving them away. So if you're in a place where you see some of this tooling that might work for you, let us know. And then as I do research on each of our speakers, And Lauren, we had a dinner together at the Hinge Brokerage Group's Shift conference. And I actually met Virginia, and then we got pulled to dinner together. It was such a great night. But what Virginia and what Lauren are doing, they have resources at Early Education Business Consultants. They're way ahead of things. They have a COVID-19 section here, so please, we'll send this out after the webinar. You'll get an email tomorrow with this, and with reference to this and orientation here. But after the webinar, please go here if you need any reference material or content. So let's get started. Again, my name's Scott Wayman. I'm the founder and CEO at Kangaroo Time. Thank you all for joining us today for our webinar with Lauren Small. She's the CEO at Early Education Business Consultants. So Kangaroo Time, we know a lot of people are new to our webinars, so we've connected with thousands of you through the webinar. And I think a few months back, or a month back, we decided we were going to stop our pursuit of growth and customer acquisition. We felt like this was such a critical inflection point for all of us as advocates for early educators. So we needed to dig in and familiarize ourselves with policy and see what we could do as an industry friend and as an industry partner to help each and every educator out there that are trying to serve their families, be stewards to the business that you guys have built, and then nurture and shepherd over the family, over the staff and the employees that you're impacting each and every day. So if you have any suggestions for us, our marketing team, our sales team, our executive team, we're here for the next however long to bring you content. Join the Facebook group, also our YouTube channel. We're getting hundreds of thousands of hours of viewing a week. Please go to our YouTube channel. All this content is there. We want you to see it. We want you to share it with friends. It's great. It's great stuff. Genevieve is really on top of things to put it there for you. So a few things. Continuing education certificates. You will get those if you are here and you did sign up for the webinar. Hey guys, just a quick check. How's the sound doing?
Scott, you're a little spotty on the internet.
Okay, we're gonna fight through this for now. Let me just see if I can do anything on my side. Let's just fight through it. And Lauren's won't be as choppy. I'll fix mine in a moment. So you will get certificates tomorrow. If you do have any questions, please click the QA button. It does look like I am chopping up still. Hang on, can you guys hold for me for just a moment? I'm going to call in via phone. This will make this more pleasant for everybody. Genevieve, put you on the spot.
While we have some time, I'll just take some time now to talk about some webinars that we have coming up next week that I hope everyone can join us for. We have one on Tuesday, the 28th at 2 p.m. We have Kim Stewart, and she's going to be talking about supporting children and supporting your staff through this traumatic time. She's had 25 years of experience working in, the early education field, and she is actually on the task force for response here in Erie County, where we're located, where Buffalo is located. So that'll be a really great webinar. So I hope you all can join us for that. We'll also send a link that you can register for that. And then next Thursday, the 30th, we also have another Buffalo native. We have Christina Ficio, and she's going to be talking about leading through crisis. So it's great for anybody who is a people manager or if you're an owner. And she's going to talk about, this moment right now and how you best can lead your team. So again, we'll send that link out. Both of those are at 2 p.m. on Tuesday and Thursday of next week. And just watch out, we'll have a lot more content coming up. And then also in our KT Childcare Connect Facebook group, that's open to anybody in the industry. So we're just talking about the issues that matter most right now. So it's everything from getting your PPP loan. We're talking about, mindfulness, meditation, how you can best support your team. So please join us on that, as Scott pulled up the screen there. And it looks like he's calling in.
Hey, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Awesome. I can hear my own echo and it's driving me crazy, so I'll probably drop off the phone call. Anyway, thank you for that. Glad to have you all here. Like we had said before, QA, put your questions into the QA queue. Your microphone and cameras are turned off. I had somebody call me the other day afterwards and say, oh my God, I think I left my camera on in the restroom. Don't worry about that, we've got you. The session is being recorded. Let's get to Lauren. So Lauren is going to lead this training today. We're tremendously grateful to the team from Early Education Business Consultants, a 10-year-old consultancy that's focused on educating owners and directors and early childhood program on business management and leadership best practices. The company offers on-site and online trainings and coaching programs to communities with a particular focus on business systems and automation processes for early childhood businesses. We have with us Lauren Small, the CEO, who brings a wealth of knowledge and many years of experience in supporting early childhood businesses, and we appreciate her sharing her expertise with us today. We also have Virginia Marchand, and with that, I'll let you take it away. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that introduction. Welcome, everyone. It's really an honor for me to be here today. I appreciate the invite from the team at Kangaroo Time, so thank you. I have sometimes inappropriate, I know this is a tough time for everyone. Sometimes I have inappropriate humor, and I just want to take a moment and enjoy the moment that the tech guy had technical issues. So that makes us all feel a little bit better, Scott, that it's even tech guys have challenges, right? So first of all, can you all hear me? Genevieve, is my sound okay?
Yeah, I can hear you crystal clear. Thank you.
Okay. Our talk today is around financial forecasting. And as Scott said, let me just talk a little bit more about my company, Early Education Business Consultants. Get in the rhythm with the Zoom. I'm talking to all of you from our world headquarters. We like to joke in Hampton Roads, Virginia, my home office in Virginia Beach, Virginia. So again, it's really nice to be here for you all to share what we've been learning through this crisis. And my goal today, I hope, is to take down the overwhelm a little bit and give you some practical information. And that's what our company does. It educates on best business practices. We have training programs and, consulting, all kinds of stuff like that. But our niche and what we try to do is take the language of business and make it easier to understand, but easier to implement. And that's kind of my goal today, is to take things that may seem a little complex and overwhelming. I mean, it's been, the information that's been coming even to us has been overwhelming, and we do this every day. So I have a lot of compassion, and I can understand where everyone might just be a little bit overwhelmed. So I think the information we're going to share today will help you at least a little piece of, how to move forward a little bit more confidently. And I'm working two screens here. We kind of grew into this industry, and I've been working in this industry for over 10 years. I have over 25 years, though, teaching business management and entrepreneurism for small business development centers. We grew into this kind of role in the industry because I think many of you could resonate and recognize that a lot of people in leadership and management roles in our industry grew into that role first as educators. And so very often folks haven't had formal business training. And we've been able to kind of bridge that gap, I think, with a lot of the things we've been doing. I consider my company social entrepreneurs, in that we're really trying to facilitate social change. And I just appreciate a moment to talk about that. I think all of us are working very hard to create environments for children to really thrive and grow and just be super successful. We've known for a long time that we're essential services. I think the rest of the country is now recognizing that, and we have this huge opportunity to kind of come together and raise our voice to advocate for our industry. And so we feel like we play a small part in those strong outcomes for children by really getting businesses to build strong foundations. So it's not just training, but really making sure that you have a solid platform of business systems, marketing systems, accounting systems, human resource systems, that when those are strong and you have solid businesses, then you can really get into great work with kids. So we're very mission driven. Scott mentioned my colleague Virginia's on the phone. She's my coworker, right-hand man, and I appreciate all her help with putting this together. So I want to give a shout out to her. So the agenda for the next, half hour, 40 minutes or so is just to, I mentioned this, and I know everyone's been on a ton of webinars. Like, we're now getting experts on webinars, but maybe I can help reduce a little anxiety for everyone. We are encouraging everyone just to calm down and strategize for a moment and carve a path forward that's very proactive. And business minded, and just true leadership, being proactive. And part of that will be understanding cash flow and understanding how to use tools to analyze your cash flow. We were just talking to Scott, and they're getting ready to do some really cool, to roll out some really cool software that will help with this modeling. Scenario modeling platform. So I'm so excited to see what that looks like. But at least we'll have a moment today to get you comfortable with a spreadsheet, kind of going old school. And then I hope I have a little time just to talk about maybe some ideas for what's next. So let me just jump into it. So putting on your business hat. The language of business isn't hard. Sometimes it's just new. And I think probably working with banks and the lender requirements and all the things our owners and directors and leaders have had to do recently has really pushed us into talking the language of business. And so don't be afraid. It's okay. None of it's super complicated. It's just new, and it may seem a little overwhelming, but it's important. It's important if you're in a leadership role that you know, and I don't want to insinuate that no one cares, but it's important that we take a moment to start being able to, talk the language of business and do this forecasting, and not be afraid of digging into numbers, even if it's not your thing, asking for help. And I think the situation that we're faced with right now is going to require, and probably require for quite some time, forecasting, being analytical, running scenarios, and feeling confident that you're making really good, sound business decisions based on not just financial data. I know there's lots of variables to look at, but that you're being more confident being a business leader. I think COVID-19 has shined a light on our industry. We already knew that we had cracks in our business model, but COVID-19 has really shown that we have a very fragile business model. Many of my clients had maybe 1 month, 2 months of cash to carry them through as a cushion. And COVID-19 has really shown how fragile many of our businesses are in this industry. And so in order to navigate through the crisis and really to recognize that it may not be back to normal come June, like in our state of Virginia, the stay-at-home order will be lifted, they're anticipating in early June. Some states sooner, who knows? But, I think we would be remiss, to think that we're going to be right back to business at full throttle of where we were before. And so we as business leaders have to probably start really thinking about what that means in terms of our revenues, our expenses, our staffing. So what we're encouraging is this really proactive mindset. And when let me just follow my notes and stop winging it like I normally do. Virginia cautioned me, stop trying to always wing it. But one of the biggest things we hope you'll take away today is to really be more confident with this proactive mindset. What we've been seeing with a lot of providers is that they get a new piece of information, they make a decision, they implement, and I think what we've been cautioning is to really just pause for a minute and think very strategically and develop a plan. That making too many quick decisions could be detrimental to the business. So we know you have had a ton of stuff coming at you. Many of you were faced with, should I open or close? Right now, some of you may be looking, should I reopen? Should I scale up? What should I do there? The decision to open or close wasn't just financial. There was a lot of a lot of variables to consider, and there was no right or wrong answer. You had to do what you thought was best given all the variables. Many of you were trying to figure out, and that decision's kind of been made, but what are we going to charge families? We have families that aren't coming. They've lost their jobs. Should we continue to charge? Should we discount? Should we not charge? And that was tough. And I think some providers are still trying to figure out how to navigate that piece of it. And then the staffing piece, has been a whole other kind of scenario analysis, right? Do I keep staff on and continue to pay them their full salary? Do I reduce hours? Do I furlough? Do I lay people off? And that's just probably the start. When you look at the loan programs and the things that have been coming available, trying to decide which opportunity to go after, how to do it, the timing of all that, I know has been just another huge, I don't even know what to call it, a huge activity to go through. If you think about it though, each one of those scenarios and each piece of it, there's a financial aspect to it. There's a number to it. And that's where we want to start kind of getting everyone's mindset, is to start looking at everything not that money's the only thing, but right now we're in a financial crisis, and we want you all to be able to come through this successfully on the other end. So as you start looking at the way forward, attaching a number, a financial figure to your decision making is part of this proactive mindset. So what we want to do is kind of pause for a moment, take away the emotion, and just realize that every business decision becomes part of your financial plan, and just start trying to forecast out, not just the next few months, but really forecast out, the rest of the year, and even start getting comfortable with forecasting out yearly, month by month. What we want to do is really challenge all of you to beef up your skills and ability to do financial analysis using whatever tool you are comfortable with. We're going to share with you our spreadsheet. You're going to see this awesome tool that Kangaroo Time is working on, but recognizing that it's important and that you've got to be comfortable with it. And if you're not, to ask for help, get the training. We have an industry of technical assistance providers, folks out there just waiting, to support you all, your teenagers, your friends, but it's really important that we get comfortable doing this financial modeling. So what I wanted to talk about today is how important the cash flow is. Cash is king. And so when a company runs out of cash, it typically means they are out of business. A cash flow it represents how liquidable your assets are. And liquid assets just mean that I can turn an asset that I have into cash quickly to pay my bills. So, for example, owning a building, it's a wonderful asset, but you can't turn it around, so it's not a liquidable, asset that you could quickly turn into cash. As I mentioned, COVID-19 has really shown us how vulnerable our business model is. And so many providers out there have been just scrambling to cover their expenses and just to stay afloat with the cash position. So this idea of cash flow is really understanding each period, each month, or some are even running it weekly, bi-weekly, how much money is coming in, how much is coming out, and what is our cash position each month, and really working to figure out if there's any upcoming gaps in our cash flow that we have to be aware of. And that's really where this proactive approach will be beneficial, because if you can forecast out months, weeks, whatever, and see where you're going to run into trouble based on the numbers that you have now, you can start the work now to try to plug that hole and develop a strategy. So there's lots of loan programs, there's some grants, there's things happening, but there's a timing issue to it. And so again, knowing when you're going to run into problem and then understand the timing of these loan programs, it can avoid a lot of stress if you can know exactly when you're going to need cash and how much. A lot of times, people don't know how much they're looking for. I think this knowledge too is going to help lawmakers. I see I love our governor, but they're putting a lot of requirements on childcare providers that may not be financially viable. It just may not be realistic. And how powerful would that be if we as an army of providers can start really saying, here's what our model looks like, here's where the gap is, we need help. You're saying we're an essential service, that this economy doesn't work, nothing happens without us, but our model doesn't work. And here's my data to show it. So this next slide shows you an example of the spreadsheet we developed at EEBC for this particular situation. And it's just a simple cash flow spreadsheet. This tool is available on the website, earlyeducationbusiness.com. You can download it. It's customizable. We do have some formulas in there that are protected, but the idea is that you have money coming in and money coming out, and you're trying to plug it in the right time period when that transaction is going to happen. And not, sometimes when people see a spreadsheet or a tool, because a lot of you are in the classroom all day, you're working with kids. This isn't part of your normal day. It can feel a little overwhelming, but I promise you, the more you work with it, you look at it, you get some help with it, you'll get more comfortable with it. Ideally, when you're more comfortable, you can run these scenarios. You can run different strategies and see which one is going to be the best strategy for you financially. Just between, the small business disaster loans, and people are like, should I apply for the EIDL loan? Should I go for the PPP? The PPP sounds really attractive, but then when you start digging into it, it may not actually make the most sense. So really gathering all the information and plugging it in here to run scenarios, I think will, again, help you start feeling more confident about your financial decisions. So I mentioned money coming in, and let me just, your money coming in, your revenue is reflected in the tuition payments that are coming in. If you accept subsidy of some sort, that'll be another line item. Trying to forecast the timing of it. What's been interesting, subsidy payments have been the most consistent, steady income through COVID-19. In our state of Virginia, even if those children aren't attending, you're able to capture revenue from subsidy children. And so if you're getting those calls, you don't currently accept subsidy children, that might be probably something to think about for your strategy. If you participate in the food program, that would be another source of revenue. And in our state, again, there's been some benefits, some changes that they have made to capture more revenue with the food program that you might not normally be able to. And then, the loans, whether it's the disaster loans or other loan programs that you're participating in, and then the grants, if you're able to capture any grant money or crowdfunding, anything like that. So the idea is you're capturing all the possible revenue sources in your spreadsheet, and plugging that in the correct time period. So this slide here is just an example of the top of the spreadsheet. You'll see that in April, this business, and again, these are just made up numbers, it's not real, but you'll see on this spreadsheet that this business has $20,000 in their account. This means in their business bank account, liquidable cash that they have to work with come April 1st is $20K. They were able to get in April the EIDL, actually we should have put that up top, Virginia, the EIDL advance of $10,000. And you'll see that they also got their PPP money in May. Now I mentioned if your cash flow situation is really tight, you're sweating it every week, then you can change these time periods and do cash flow every week. It's just trying to commit to staying up with it and keeping it current. And then these columns, obviously you could customize if you wanted to, the titles. And then your money going out is your expenses, right? And actually, let me just back up. I put on the top of this one, family communication. You might have seen that. Just a side note, we have seen such incredible results with our clients who are being very and continuing to be very proactive, staying in touch with their families. I think that comes naturally for all of you, but that's also a recommended best practice right now. Even if they're not attending, even if they've disenrolled, staying connected to them as their childcare provider, as their preschool is important, not only to connect, you know, educationally, but also to shore up that relationship so that when things start to get back to normal, you're just part of the team. Like they just naturally swoop back into your services and they don't make a change there. We've also seen how the parent communication when it comes to capturing revenue and you know, and again, every situation is different. You all know your families more than I do. But that relationship has been a key to success in capturing more revenues than people had thought possible. And so I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. So money going out, again, is your expenses. And the best practice, you know, Scott, you guys have probably been on the Hinge webinars. I've listened to your, I've just appreciated all the great guidance we've gotten immediately from these national webinars. And so this has been our mantra too, is to encourage everyone. Obviously you're reviewing all your expenses, and this is a time to be as frugal as possible, reducing if possible, eliminating non-essential expenses. And then really part of, you know, as we get more confident with financial analysis, you know, we know labor cost in our industry is our largest expense. For many of you, it goes beyond 50% of revenues into 60%. Some faith-based programs even into 70%. And so having the ability to analyze your labor costs, I think is going to be hugely beneficial. I mentioned in my state, we now have a 10-person per classroom, or 10, I forget what it's called, but 10-person per classroom requirement. And so you can imagine how staffing for that, those reduced numbers, really trying to reach break even with that requirement is challenging. And so having the capability to run, you know, the break even analysis per classroom, given, you know, if you have requirements on your labor costs, I think is going to be a key, you know, key to success in running really accurate projections and staffing appropriately. Many providers have had success in working with, you know, all their vendors, the people they pay money to ask for delayed payment options, reduced payment options, reduced interest rate, deferred payments, really working with your creditors if you feel like, again, once you're doing your cash flow, that you need that little bit of cushion. I have seen a lot of success in being proactive in reaching out to creditors to ask, you know, just to make the ask. I think for some folks it's uncomfortable to have to do that, but I think this situation requires that we, again, be proactive and move past being uncomfortable if it's going to, you know, make the difference in your cash flow. And just on the spreadsheet to show you that expenses, with our spreadsheet, we have another sheet where you can actually plug in, you know, your staff and the cost of those payroll hours, and it automatically feeds into this spreadsheet. So that may help with some of the calculations. You'll see here highlighted on the insurance, let's see, 1,365 going out in July. You know, sometimes when we budget, we just say, okay, we spend, you know, $1,500 a year on insurance, and we'll just, you know, spread that across 12 months. But for this analysis, we really need to plug in when that money's going to be going out. So this company, they pay their insurance in July, so they're forecasting out in July that much money is going to be going out for that.
Lauren, I was just going to jump in real quick as I see something popping up. I think, everybody's situation is different depending on what kind of loans or grants they've secured. And the best we can advise is to be in contact with your lender and understand the rules from the lender. There's a lot of questions and gray areas and really undefined terms with the PPP and the forgiveness, and especially when it revolves around your head count and your payroll amounts. That's not what we were going to dive into today, but I think just reminding you, really be in contact with your provider because they can lend the best information to help you make those decisions. Because, looking at the payroll, whether or not you reduce your payroll expenses or you keep your payroll expenses level, that's all going to be determined based on what kind of loans and grants you've secured.
Yeah, and I can only imagine the questions coming around that. I have a contact that's an SBA lender, and he shared that they were not given a lot of guidance in how the calculations for the PPP would be determined. I think we're starting to see some of that come out, but Virginia's exactly correct. Like, every lender is coming up with their own requirements, and that's why it's hard to advise, but there's not as much consistency and information as you would hope for. So you have to be careful with those loans, because if there's a portion, well, like the PPP, we're hoping it will turn into a forgivable grant, but there's going to be a calculation that happens when it's all said and done, based on what happened last year, which was your full payroll that we based this loan on, and then what does it look like right now? And if there's a gap, a portion of your PPP could turn into a loan. And what we want to do is make sure that you're understanding that and forecasting for that. And that's where, again, going back to the lender and really trying to understand, when the dust settles, how they're going to base that calculation and what it means for your forecast, and segregating that money so that you're prepared if that should happen, if you have to pay some of it back, or understand that it will turn into a loan that has to be paid back within 2 years at a 1% interest rate. It's not a bad interest rate, but again, your forecast has to be able to support paying back a loan. And that's the thing, loans have to be repaid, and there's a repayment schedule. And if things are already stretched really tight with reduced enrollment, and we know that there's probably going to be reduced enrollment throughout the rest of this year, our customers have lost their jobs, their hours have been reduced. We're seeing all these little businesses close down. I think we can expect that our industry is going to mirror what's happening in the economy, and there may be a reduced demand for childcare services. We have to start being realistic about what's ahead of us. So not taking on debt that is unrealistic for you to be able to repay. And that's what these cash flow projections can help you do, is start putting some real numbers to what you project for your revenue, what you think your family's, what is going to be coming in. And if you have the capability to look at each customer and get as detailed as possible on your tuition revenues and what's going to be coming in June, July, August, September, and start trying to make these as accurate as possible, because I think it's getting to that point where we're down to the pennies of really knowing what our cash position looks like. And so with cash flow projections, the timing is so key. When is that money going to show up in the account? When does the loan repayment start? When can I start, expecting to get a little bit back to normal and start scaling up? When do things happen? Trying to project out the loan and grant injections, the revenue, everything I just talked about, the labor costs, the expenses. And the big thing is just, again, trying to identify if there's going to be a financial gap, and then you can get proactive with coming up with the money, hopefully, to fill that gap. And in our spreadsheet, in any spreadsheet with the cash flow, you see these parentheses here. This indicates that this business is needs they're in the hole 17,000 based on their numbers. So it identified for them, they were looking okay in August, they had 22,000 in cash. Oh, September got a little wonky. It didn't get back to, fall revenue like they thought perhaps. And then by October, they were really in a bad cash position. And so this is where right now we should be forecasting all the way out through the end of the year to see if we can identify those. Some of you may be thinking, well, how am I supposed to have a crystal ball and forecast my revenue this summer or in the fall? You're telling me it will look different. So how do I do that? I think, in Virginia, we were on a call. This was such a great recommendation that she made is, first of all, calling every single one of your families, whether they're attending or not, and trying to understand what is going to happen with them when, the stay-at-home orders are lifted. Are they coming back? This is a time, I think, to start looking at things a little differently too and being flexible. You may have families that need part-time care, that may need after-school care, and I think that we should be considering all options, even if it's not something that you've done in the past. So contacting each of those families and understanding what their current position is, are they coming back? When are they coming back? If in a nurturing, supportive way, but just trying to understand what your revenue is going to look like when things kind of get back to normal, I think would help. And then being somewhat conservative, but, thinking about a scale back up. Once you know what it's going to look like for us in June, then a scale up that gets you kind of going back to normal. And I wish I had some numbers. I think I had heard somewhere, but right now we're at 50%, 40%. What did summer look like last year for you? Well, maybe
you want some real-time numbers. I can give them to you from our data, Lauren. So
I would love that.
Okay, so I was going to break in earlier. Okay, so attendance has dropped 83% since shutdown started. So from that critical time, mid-March, 83% are check-ins in the kangaroo time, hundreds of centers reporting. So closures have steadily increased every week, and we peaked last week at 58%. Let me give you a few more numbers. Okay. Revenue collected has dropped by 62%. So those discussions with families on, are you holding spots? You're paying your full tuition, or you're losing your spot, or you're paying $10 a week or whatever. The aggregate number that we've bottomed out at is 62%. And then 23% of our centers have opted to stop collecting tuition, while 77% are collecting either partial or full. So again, being oriented and having data at scale, not from the media, that's where we're at. So love to know your thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know, you're looking at this data, Scott. What do you think for this summer and fall providers can expect in terms of, forecasting?
I think there's some regional and proximal considerations to be made. So if you're in New York City, and we've seen quite the surge there, a curve there that was really significant. Do we have folks that represent communities of herd immunity? I don't know. And then I think there are considerations to be made around what governance says, right? So in the state of Virginia, the measures that we'll be taking to get back to normal. What does that do to the typical room ratios? What does that do to your entire capacity? Again, having the metrics and the scenario modeling tools to plug in 4, 5, 6 different scenarios once a week. You know, every Sunday we do scenario modeling as a company here at Kangaroo Time to understand what our cash burn is. And I think we have kind of, 3 scenarios to simplify things. One is there's no optimism through the end of the year. There's nothing, and it's just a mad dash to hang on to cash and figure out what we need to do to be stewards to the employees that we have and the company we're trying to build. 2 is, I think you alluded to it, Lauren, getting back to normal slowly throughout May and June, and then July may be looking like, if you're typically running at 75% utilization, maybe modeling 55% there, and then slowly through Q4, getting up to 75 or 80%, whatever your typical utilization is.
Yeah, and adjusting real time, like you said, weekly, adjusting if it's not scaling up like you had hoped.
Absolutely. And again, I mean, a P&L, like an active live P&L with each and every one of those models is so critical.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's going to be a lot of shakeout too, as far as in specific communities, which childcare centers survive and some are going to close their doors. And there may be a higher demand in some areas for childcare when everything shakes out, and some it may be spread a little bit more thin. And I think paying attention to your community and how your community is responding, I think it also speaks to how much community resources are available. We've been doing so much work with our local communities and our state communities to keep the childcare facilities healthy. So I really, if you're not in tune with your local early childhood communities, now's the time to get connected, because they're in the forefronts of receiving this communication.
Were you done with your numbers, Scott?
Sorry, I was trapped on mute, trying to fight my way off. Yes, yeah, that's all I have for now. I'll break in when I have other nuggets to share.
I love it. Thank you.
Lauren, one last thought about the spreadsheet and the pitfalls that we see. So many times I think businesses try to do these calculations in their head, and the pitfall in doing that is you forget about some revenue, or you forget about some expenses. And as you see in just this example, even though it's not, actual numbers, we're in April right now, and we see the pitfall happening in October. That gives you months to prepare and plan and do what you can to make it through that, so that you're not upside down. By keeping this information in your head and not putting it out onto documents where you can see the calculations, if you sneak up on this in the tail end of August, you don't have the time to react, and that could cost opening or closing. So I think it's just a plea to take the time to get this down on paper.
Hey, Lauren, the only other thing I'll add, as we tried to de-lever and prognosticate what levers there were out there, one of the levers that kept coming up was on the cost side. So as you're building these models and having the scenario modeling tools, one of the things we talked about with Andrew Resnick last week, the infectious disease expert, is there going to be a different cost and operating paradigm because we're having to take temperatures, or we're having to administer testing? Some of the things we don't know yet about the new normal with operating models. PPE, for our office, I'm kind of feverishly looking to purchase masks. And that's a P&L expense line item I would have never thought a month and a half ago we'd ever have to consider. There are also, there are new protocols around how we operate. We already talked about it a bit with ratios, but I think building in a new cost paradigm with testing, at new FMLA laws, and how we handle sick time, you have to add in some sort of accelerator on whatever cost line you're modeling. So I'll just add that.
Right. I mean, just the cleaning supplies and the added expense of all that for providers, not everyone was planning for. So I think we're all excited about this topic because we know it's so important for all of you, is figuring out where that funding gap is. So, just to kind of summarize, developing a strategic, proactive plan is going to reduce anxiety, it's going to give you more confidence, and it's going to allow you to be a business leader that can move through this confidently. And that's going to require that you look at those short-term revenue and expenses, calculate your short-term cash flow, and then figure out where you're going to get additional revenue, additional funding, and then continuing to keep your eye on your expenses. And if you have to, look for other funding on top of what we've already seen with the disaster loans. In Virginia, and I got to imagine, I haven't had even a moment to breathe, but I got to imagine around the country, we have been rolling out the CCDF funding, the child care, through the CARES Act, the child care funding. And so if you aren't familiar with that, that's in our state been designed to support centers that are serving essential personnel and remaining open. It's been funding to support providers that accept subsidy. And so again, if you aren't aware of that, I would just do a double check in your state to make sure you're maximizing, resources that may be available to you through that funding. Some providers may have to consider, and I've had a few clients that have talked about working with their commercial banks, and that they've, been super accommodating. I think what we've seen with the whole lending environment, that smaller community banks are more small business friendly and more able to quickly adapt and provide the customer service that we need. Looking for donations, GoFundMe, crowdfunding. I just put it on there because I think right now we're open to everything. We've been really encouraging too that you stay in touch with your local economic development offices in your community. They've been a great resource of information on local grants, small business grants, supports for business. They need to know of your need. And then for those of you who own your business, I hate even putting this on here, but if we're looking to be creative, home equity loans, the IRS has reduced the restrictions on withdrawing money from retirement accounts. There's no penalties. And then, this list could keep building. I think as we all continue to share resources, if we can add something to this, we're continuing to try to put this info on our website. So our immediate next steps, and in our state, we recognize that any provider that could benefit from the CCDF funding should apply for that immediately. That stuff was rolled out this week. We've been encouraging providers. The second step is that it sounds like it's moving through Congress, that there will be a second stimulus package, opening up more money for the EIDL, the disaster loan program, as well as the PPP. If you missed out on that first round of funding and it's something that could benefit your business after you've run through, your analysis, the recommendation is to make sure that you have a lender, you're a business lender, that you have an account there, that you have a relationship. Many providers in the early care and education system weren't prepared for that, even with a business banking relationship. And then, of course, getting the paperwork in, understanding what that bank is looking for. I was in the same situations, you know, as many of you. And I've had to be really calling my bank daily to find out if they have a completed application and if they have everything they need and is my company in the queue, and then getting that funding in place. We're recommending right now, if you can, to really have someone on your team with a dedicated effort looking for grants for business financial supports, because it's just like a run on the bank with everything. And there's such a need in our country right now. And so when things open up, there's just a huge number of people that are applying. And having someone to help you get those financial documentation, get that information turned around pretty quickly. We talked about securing your current customer base. And then, you know, and nobody's talking about this, but your forecast may show that your business is not viable, that it's going to just continue to deplete your resources. And so I hope I don't get in trouble for this, but you may want to be proactive in considering an exit strategy or a new strategy, and instead of just continuing to dump money in a sinking ship. And then long-term strategies, you know, that we know we're going to be in a big period of rebuilding. The conversation, I think we know our industry is going to look a little different, and that we've had, I don't know, you probably have heard this, we have a broken business model, but I think we have a huge opportunity coming out of this to do things differently, to look at things differently, and to really try to work towards automation, fully using technology, streamlining back offices, strengthening business practices, strengthening our businesses to be able to withstand, you know, that hopefully we don't have another pandemic, but that we, you know, use this opportunity to advocate for higher wages, to help, you know, the benefits, this professionalism of the industry that we know is so important and hasn't been happening. And so if you have some downtime, you know, I hope you will use this time to think about your innovations and your business systems. And there's going to be probably a lot of folks out there looking for work. You know, we've had such high turnover, but maybe this will be a little bit of the silver lining, is that you'll be able to recruit some really talented people that want to do the work, that want to educate young children. And so looking at how you hire and how you train and how you onboard, I think could be very powerful use of your time. And so just to wrap up, lastly, we put together a little planning sheet. You know, sometimes it helps to take a lot of ideas and put it down on paper. This is on the website. A lot of times when we do strategic planning, we talk about a lot of ideas, and then it's like, all right, what's the next step? What are we going to do today? What are we going to do tomorrow? And let's focus on that. That's going to help us achieve the goal. And then our website is broken out. Here's the link, earlyeducationbusiness.com. These are the categories. This webinar, we track a few of the national webinars. We put the links on there. And then lastly, I keep saying that, don't I? The last thing is I wanted to put on here America's SBDC network. If you need help with business counseling, I worked for them for, oh gosh, 20 years now. And that is just an incredible organization that is located throughout the country. They're partially funded by the Small Business Administration. They are the counseling arm of the SBA. They are truly experts in these loan programs. They have a lot of retired, successful business people that work for them, and they provide free counseling, low-cost training with the sole purpose to help entrepreneurs thrive and prosper. So I put their link there, that if you want to find a local office, they're really experts, especially with this SBA, you know, with all the lending stuff. This is probably their #1 question that they get. And so I'm done, Scott.
Q&A side, it looks like Virginia, you were You were diligently answering questions as we went through. So we look to be up to speed. One thing I want to mention as we close, in the KT Childcare Connect group, I started a new thread. I want to hear from each of our providers out there what's going on when you're having those conversations with your parents. I think the few threads or the few responses that we've heard have been inspiring, and they've been amazing to see how families are responding to helping keep your businesses viable, and understanding that you have an operating threshold that you need to adhere to keep the business alive. And I think, Lauren, one of the things you said was you have to have those conversations. And I think we're all better if we orient and we support each other and understand how those conversations are going. And they're not all going to go great. But I think that's one thread I'd like to see very active. I cannot agree more with staying in touch with families. I've closed since March 13th and email my parents almost every day, held Zoom meetings, and children and parents. And I received such an outpouring of generosity from them. That's from Tracy. Tracy, thanks for sharing that.
Wow.
That's amazing. But Lauren, awesome content. I think this pair bonds, this couples very well with the scenario modeling tool that I'm doing with David and Genevieve. And Genevieve, when will we have that session? We'll announce that session. Is that Wednesday next week?
Yeah, we'll send out an email to everybody who's on our subscriber list to firm up the details of it, but probably next week.
Awesome. Virginia, you're one hell of a wingman.
Isn't she the best?
That was awesome. Yeah, I'm going to have Virginia jump on these things. Guys, thanks so much. Wade, I see that we'll get your question back to you. Great to see you here. So it's great to see so many of our customers here too, and many of you that we've been working with for years. Hey, everybody, stay healthy. Let us know if there's anything we can do for you on the advocacy side or on the policy side, anything we can help with the PPP. And we wish you all well, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Lauren and Virginia. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a good one. We'll see you.